At 2:17 a.m. in eastern Ukraine, near the shattered tree lines outside Donetsk Oblast, a convoy moved without headlights. No voices, no engines, just electric hums and blinking telemetry. Within minutes, unmanned vehicles slipped into trenches that had resisted assaults for months. Explosives were placed with machine precision. Supplies arrived under fire without a single human exposed. And then the unthinkable happened. No infantry advanced, no armored column followed. There were no boots in the mud at all. What unfolded next would be logged by military analysts as the first documented assault conducted entirely by machines. Airborne drones coordinated from above. Ground robots crawled forward below. Command links remained encrypted, and when the operation ended, Ukrainian units reported 0 human losses. The implications rippled instantly through defense ministries worldwide. Just 3 years earlier, Ukraine possessed roughly 20 Turkish-made Bayraktar drones and a handful of volunteer quadcopters. No robotic ground force, no autonomous doctrine. By December 2024, that had changed. By July 2025, entire operations were executed using only drones and unmanned ground vehicles, forcing opposing units to withdraw under pressure without direct human contact. These machines were not born in billion-dollar laboratories. They emerged from garage workshops, Soviet-era warehouses, and makeshift facilities within miles of active fighting. Each unit cost as little as $750 to convert. Some carried supplies, others evacuated injured soldiers. Some drove directly into fortified positions carrying over 60 pounds of explosives. All of them shared one goal: keep humans out of the kill zone. Global militaries are now scrambling to understand what this means. Because if wars can be fought this way, faster, cheaper, and without exposing soldiers, then everything changes. And this was only the beginning. This transformation did not happen by choice. It happened under pressure. Ukraine is fighting a larger adversary with greater manpower, deeper stockpiles, and a defense budget fueled by energy exports. By 2025, Russia was spending roughly 8% of its GDP on military activity. Ukraine's share had surged past 35%. One side relied on volume, the other relied on adaptation. At the start of 2022, Ukraine's unmanned capability was close to zero. There were no ground robots, no autonomous units, no doctrine for robotic warfare. The armed forces depended on human logistics convoys, human medics, and human assaults. Every resupply run meant exposure. Every evacuation meant more risk. As drones multiplied overhead, simply moving became dangerous. The battlefield itself changed. What was once a front line became a zone stretching more than 10 miles deep. Surveillance drones watched roads day and night. First-person view drones hunted anything that moved. According to military estimates cited by Western defense analysts, unmanned systems were responsible for the majority of battlefield strikes by late 2024. Ukraine faced a brutal imbalance. A $400 drone could disable equipment worth millions. A single mistake could expose an entire unit. Matching force with force was no longer viable, so Ukraine changed the equation. Instead of asking how many soldiers could advance, planners asked how many machines could move instead. Instead of replacing losses, engineers focused on removing humans from the most dangerous tasks altogether. The contrast was stark: cheap versus expensive, disposable versus reusable, human risk versus machine risk. By mid-2022, volunteer units began modifying consumer drones. By 2023, FPV production surged to nearly 600,000 units. In 2024, that number exceeded 1.5 million. By 2025, production targets reached 4.5 million units annually, over 12,000 per day. While aerial drones drew attention, quieter experiments unfolded on the ground. Wheeled platforms, tracked platforms, trial runs through mud, rubble, and trenches. Some failed immediately. Others survived just long enough to prove a point. Machines could go where humans could not, and when they failed, no family received a notification. This was not a futuristic vision, it was survival logic, and it was about to accelerate. The evolution moved faster than any formal military program in recent history. In early 2023, small unmanned ground vehicles began appearing in combat footage. At first, they were little more than remote-controlled carts. They carried water, ammunition, and medical kits. They moved slowly, rarely exceeding 10 miles per hour. Speed was not the objective, survival was. Then the missions expanded. By late 2023, tracked robots were entering forward trenches at night. Operators guided them through debris fields littered with burned out armor. Cameras shook, signals flickered. Some robots never returned. Others came back with bullet marks, shrapnel damage, and critical data. Each failure became a lesson. The first major escalation came in December 2024. Ukrainian units conducted what analysts later described as the world's first fully unmanned ground-air coordinated assault. Aerial drones suppressed observation points. Ground robots advanced beneath them. Explosives were delivered directly into fortified positions. No infantry followed. When the operation ended, opposing forces withdrew under sustained pressure. There were no Ukrainian personnel inside the engagement zone. That moment changed perceptions. By mid-2025, the 3rd Assault Brigade executed an entire operation using only drones and ground robots. The result was unprecedented. Positions were neutralized. Equipment was abandoned. Ukrainian commanders reported 0 human losses. Military observers across Europe took notice. But the escalation did not stop there. In workshops near Donetsk, platoon commanders like Oleksandr stripped factory-built robots down to bare frames. Default analog communications were removed. New wiring was installed. Encrypted digital links replaced vulnerable systems. Starlink terminals were added when possible. Each conversion took hours. Each upgrade cost between $750 and $1,000, not including connectivity hardware. Then came the twists. First, payloads increased. While aerial drones maxed out at roughly 22 pounds, even small ground robots carried more than 48 pounds. Larger platforms exceeded 60 pounds. Some robots drove directly into basements and dugouts before detonating. Precision replaced mass. One mission involved a ground robot delivering 66 pounds of explosives into a fortified structure, striking from inside rather than above. Second, roles multiplied. Robots laid mines under drone overwatch. Others cleared routes ahead of advancing units. Some carried electronic warfare modules. Others mounted remote-controlled weapons. In August 2025, Ukraine's 28th Mechanized Brigade revealed a ground robot equipped with a man-portable air defense system, creating a mobile concealed air defense platform. Third, logistics shifted. Supply convoys that once required trucks and drivers were replaced by machines operating at night. Medical evacuations followed. Tracked robots moved wounded personnel without exposing 8-person teams to drone surveillance. Communication loss remained a risk, but when it worked, lives were preserved in conditions where human recovery would have meant additional losses. Russia responded. State media showcased its own unmanned platforms in August 2024. Development accelerated. Electronic warfare intensified. Jamming systems activated in cycles, creating narrow windows for movement. Ukraine adapted again. Fiber optic controlled robots appeared. Thin cables trailed behind machines for up to 12 miles, immune to jamming. It was an old solution reborn under modern pressure. When connections failed, experiments with autonomous fallback systems began. This was no longer innovation. It was an arms race unfolding in real time. The consequences of this shift are already visible across Ukraine's military, economy, and society. From a military perspective, the impact is immediate. Unmanned ground vehicles remove humans from the most dangerous tasks on the battlefield. Logistics runs, forward resupply, route clearance, medical evacuation. Each robot mission replaces what once required multiple soldiers, vehicles, and hours of exposure. According to Ukrainian military medical officials cited by international media, most battlefield injuries by 2024 were linked to drone activity rather than direct firefights. Movement, not combat, had become the most dangerous act. Ground robots changed that equation. A single reusable unmanned vehicle costing under $10,000 can complete dozens of missions. In contrast, replacing a damaged armored vehicle can cost hundreds of thousands. Replacing trained personnel costs years. The cost-exchange ratio is no longer balanced. It is lopsided. Economically, this matters. Ukraine's GDP in 2025 remains under severe strain. Infrastructure damage exceeds $150 billion, according to World Bank-aligned estimates reported by Reuters and the BBC. Millions remain displaced. Labor shortages persist. In that environment, preserving trained manpower is a strategic necessity, not a moral abstraction. Robotic systems also shorten decision loops. Traditional procurement cycles in Western militaries can take 5 to 10 years from concept to field deployment. In Ukraine, that cycle has collapsed to weeks. Soldiers test systems in combat, modify them overnight, and redeploy within days. This feedback loop, combat, adapt, redeploy, has no modern parallel. Major defense outlets have taken notice. Defense News and Jane's Defense Weekly describe Ukraine as a live laboratory for unmanned warfare. Deutsche Welle and the BBC have highlighted how battlefield improvisation now outpaces formal military research programs. Reuters has reported that NATO analysts are embedding lessons learned from Ukrainian drone and robot use into alliance doctrine. The societal impact is just as profound. Families understand that machines now take on roles once assigned to sons and fathers. Public support for unmanned systems has grown accordingly. Civilian fundraising networks finance robotics workshops. Volunteer engineers move between military units. Ukraine now hosts over 500 companies involved in drone and robotic production, ranging from small garages to industrial-scale facilities. There are limits. Communication loss can turn a robot into useless scrap. Electronic warfare remains a constant threat. Autonomous decision-making is still constrained by reliability concerns and ethical boundaries. But even with these limits, the direction is clear. War is becoming less about how many soldiers can be deployed and more about how many systems can be sustained. Ukraine has forced that realization onto the global stage, and the rest of the world is paying attention. What is unfolding in Ukraine is no longer a regional phenomenon. It is a global inflection point. NATO has been watching closely. In Poland, the alliance expanded the Joint Analysis, Training, and Education Center to study Ukrainian battlefield innovations in real time. Officers rotate through briefings focused not on tanks or jets, but on drones, ground robots, and electronic warfare integration. According to reporting from Reuters and Defense News, these lessons are already reshaping NATO training doctrine. The United States has moved fastest. In 2024, the Pentagon launched the Replicator Initiative, committing over $1 billion across 2 fiscal years to mass-produce autonomous systems. Funding was redirected away from certain legacy helicopter programs. The logic mirrors Ukraine's experience. Quantity now competes with quality. A single F-35 costs roughly $80 million. Hundreds of autonomous systems can be built for the same price. Former senior U.S. military leaders have been blunt. Retired General Mark Milley stated publicly that within 10 to 15 years, up to 1/3 of U.S. military formations could consist of robotic or unmanned systems. That projection did not come from theory, it came from observation. Europe faces harder choices. Defense budgets are rising, but procurement remains slow. Ukraine's model exposes a vulnerability. Expensive platforms take years to field. Cheap systems evolve weekly. Bridging that gap requires political and industrial reform. Germany, France, and the UK have all increased funding for drone and counter-drone programs, according to Deutsche Welle and the BBC, but none yet match Ukraine's speed. China is adapting in parallel. In 2024, Beijing reorganized its strategic support force, splitting it into branches focused on space, cyber, and electronic warfare. Analysts cited by Jane's note clear parallels with Ukrainian-style integrated drone operations. China's manufacturing capacity gives it an advantage once doctrine solidifies. The Middle East is watching as well. Conflicts there already rely heavily on unmanned systems. Ukrainian developments accelerate that trend. Cheap, expendable robots lower the barrier to entry for states and non-state actors alike. That reality alarms defense planners. Looking ahead 6 months, 3 scenarios dominate expert discussion. In the first, Ukraine scales successfully. The goal of deploying at least 15,000 unmanned ground vehicles by the end of 2025 becomes achievable. Combined with millions of aerial drones, this creates a layered robotic force that offsets manpower constraints. In the second, electronic warfare intensifies. Russia improves jamming and counter-robot tactics faster than Ukraine can adapt. Operations become more selective. Autonomy becomes more important, but also riskier. In the third, the model spreads. NATO, China, and regional powers adopt similar doctrines. Warfare becomes defined by production capacity and software iteration rather than manpower alone. In every scenario, one fact remains. The age of purely human-centered warfare is ending. Ukraine did not set out to change global military thinking. It was forced to, and in doing so, it may have rewritten the rules. What began as desperation has become transformation. Ukraine entered this war facing a brutal imbalance in manpower, resources, and firepower. By 2025, that imbalance still exists on paper, but on the battlefield, the equation has shifted, not through sheer force, not through numbers, through speed, adaptation, and machines that absorb risk once borne by people. Ground robots now move where soldiers once hesitated. They carry supplies through surveillance zones saturated with drones. They retrieve wounded personnel under constant threat. They clear routes, lay mines, gather intelligence, and in some cases, deliver decisive strikes. Each mission removes humans from exposure. Each success reinforces a new logic of warfare. This is not science fiction. It is happening in real time, in converted warehouses, in frontline workshops, in systems built for hundreds of dollars and improved through combat feedback measured in hours, not years. According to reporting from Reuters, the BBC, Defense News, and Jane's, no modern conflict has compressed innovation cycles this dramatically. The implications extend far beyond Ukraine. For NATO, the lesson is uncomfortable. Expensive, exquisite platforms are vulnerable to cheap, adaptable systems produced at scale. For the United States, now led by President Donald Trump, the challenge is balancing industrial power with the speed demanded by modern conflict. For Europe, the question is whether legacy procurement models can survive in an era defined by rapid iteration. And for the world, a deeper issue emerges. If wars can be fought with fewer humans in direct contact, does that lower the threshold for conflict? Does it make prolonged confrontation more sustainable? Or does it create new forms of escalation that existing doctrines cannot contain? Ukraine's robotic army was not built to change warfare. It was built to endure it. Yet its impact is undeniable. A country once dependent on limited unmanned tools now operates millions of drones and plans to deploy tens of thousands of ground robots. That trajectory has forced every major military power to rethink assumptions held for decades. The shock is not that this technology exists. The shock is how fast it became decisive. Will Ukraine succeed in scaling this model faster than its adversary can adapt? Will electronic warfare blunt the robotic advantage or push autonomy even further? And when these lessons spread globally, will future wars be decided by soldiers or by code, cables, and machines? Those questions are no longer theoretical. They are unfolding now. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for continued analysis.